Okay. So, hello, how are you? Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about Kleros. I discovered a couple of days ago that my talk was supposed to last for 1 hour instead of the 20 minutes I had thought in the beginning. So what I did is bring you, not only talk about Kleros and how it works and what it does, but also the why it's important for us to build this and at this moment in history. So a lot of this material is part of my forthcoming book, so I'm going to tell you more about that if you want after the talk. So the story starts with this guy that I guess you all know, right? It's Benedict Cumberbatch. In the skin of Alan Turing, he was he created the Enigma, the machine to decrypt the Enigma code that the Nazis used to communicate with the submarines. So he was the inventor of the computer science on computers. And after this big computer that was an entire room, of course, we have Gordon Moore saying that the amount of chips, the transistors inside a microchip doubles every 2 years, so we get computers each time smaller. I got first into the computer world like in the 1980s when my grandfather bought a Commodore 128. I don't know if any of you had one of those, maybe? So, computing cost performance goes down, the storage cost goes down. Of course, we get to have smaller and smaller memory cards. And then 1989, this guy comes, you know who he is? Yes, of course. It's Tim Berners-Lee who creates the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and that's how the World Wide Web is born. Then if we add the diminishing cost of bandwidth, we get, of course, that the internet starts to take over the world and that people start to have smartphones everywhere, right? This is a very interesting image. It's taken in a favela in Brazil. So these guys, very poor kids, they still have the same phone that like Larry and Sergey at Google, right? Because it's mostly the same. It has the same apps. So after the technology comes, then comes the entrepreneurs and starts the most important transformation of the economy of all times. Mark Andreessen has this famous article in the Wall Street Journal where he says that software is eating the world. And the early days of the internet came with a lot of very high expectations because we could see the crowds taking over the power, right? And the internet seemed to be disintermediating very old and very powerful intermediaries. One of the first victims were the record companies. Basically were like enslaving artists. The industry of the music went down very, very fast. Second, of course, the media and the newspapers, the big monsters of propaganda. Look how the newspaper industry reaches the peak in 2000 in the US, and then look how fast it crumbles to the ground. And we have these two actors, first Google and then Facebook, that start to take over the world, right? Anyone of you know this guy? Jaron Lanier? Yeah, he's one of the inventors of VR in the 80s. And he has this very good book, I recommend you read that, called Who Owns the Future? And he says that, yeah, this internet that was starting as some liberating force for helping the small guy, eventually ended up becoming the big monster because we had all these huge centralized global monopolies. Just take a look about the size of Amazon. Yeah, it started in 1990s for selling books, and look, now it's bigger than all the competitors together, yeah? Including Walmart, which was one of the bad guys of the early days. So you can see that, I guess, in the how this guy changes his attitude to life as he to be like a Bruce Willis of retail. So, I sometimes ask this question. I get different answers depending on what's the audience. Who here thinks that Trump is more powerful? Okay, one. The rest? Are you too lazy to, or do you think that Zuckerberg is more powerful than Trump? Too lazy. Eh? Yeah, okay. So, Facebook is a community of 2 billion, right? Now, since last year, they know who we are. They control everything we read. They start to control how we transact, so the e-commerce they are building. They are starting to handle payments, and when you start to handle payments, then you can start giving credit to people, and when you start giving credit to people, then why not create your own coin, right? It's not very hard for you if you are such a big platform. So some people believe that these big platforms actually, instead of companies, are starting to look more like states. This is a Wired article published last year speaking about net states, right? For example, Facebook has become like a government now. And if it was a government, what kind of government would it be? What's the form of government of a very big platform owned by one guy, right? So Ricators had this country he basically owned, and he used to make the law, and he also controlled the enforcement mechanisms, right? He has the musketeers for that. The metaphor, if you continue with that, so you have this very big platform that makes the law. These are the terms and conditions of Facebook. I don't know if any of you took the like burden to read this. Look at the web, how it's like the design, it's awful. So they don't even pay attention to that. Of course, they make the rules, and they have the enforcement mechanisms, right? They have the right to ban you from the platform. As the old Greek, when they had trial there and you lost, you could be banned from the community, ostracism. Hello? So, some people think that Zuckerberg, in a metaphoric way, has become a kind of modern king. And this picture actually is really, this Philip IV is an actual like Spanish king of the 17th century. It's not that they drew Zuckerberg, like it's really this guy was exactly like him. And the empire is of course larger than any other empire in the history of mankind, because they control most of the tools we use to communicate, except in China. So, in the 18th century, so it's good that we are in France doing this, because, you know, in the 18th century, we had these revolutions that overthrew decentralized monarchies, and then the revolutionaries had the decision to make of how to rule a large-scale modern democracy, because there were no previous experiences. So you had the crypto economists of those days were the federalists, right? They were trying to figure out how you make a system that can work for governing a country of millions of people, and that can be safe from the attackers, because you want to have attackers, you want to have collusion, right? And they had to figure out how to make it work. And they figured out that a good way to do it was division of powers, right? Executive, legislative, judiciary was a way to have a control of the governance system. And this worked like this for a long, long, long time. So, 2008 comes, and of course, we all know what happens. We get the financial crisis, and then we have this guy publishing this paper, or this guy, or guys, publishing this paper in this cryptography forum with the proposing a new technology for money. And then we had another guy proposing, oh, this works for lots more things. We could be doing governance on this. And now, all of you guys are building the new decentralized organizations that are going to rule our lives in decades to come. For music, right? For sharing economy stuff, sharing homes, sharing, etc. Whatever platform that works like a marketplace today, centralized, is being decentralized as we speak. So this generates new questions, how to govern these platforms. And we have some answers from this governance side about liquid democracy, for example, futurarchy, etc. But there is one thing that has not been treated sufficiently at this point. That is this due solution. Yeah. You know, every society, every community has to solve the problem of social order. And that is how legal systems were born. Let me take you to ancient Greece for a while. And you know how the trials work in ancient Greece? They had popular trials, right? Every citizen of the polis had the right to judge, of course, except for slaves and women. But every male citizen of the polis had the right to judge. So the Greeks were very concerned about one thing. So if everyone has a right to judge, how do you avoid like mob rule, right? You go to the trial of your friend, and so you go with your friends, and so you vote for him to win. So these guys were aware of that problem, and so they created a quite sophisticated mechanism to avoid that people could make this kind of collusions. So it was based on this token. They had a platform token, what's called Pinakion. It was like a bronze plate, like this one, that was with your name on it. And so if you wanted to be a juror on a Greek trial, you went on the court day, and at the door of the court, there was a stone block called Ethereum, and this was like a big stone block with a number of slots there. You put your ID there in one of the slots, and then came a justice official and threw some black and white dice, like 20 faces dice. Some of them were white, some of them were black. If you had on your row a white dice, you went to the jury. If you had a black one, you went home, so you were dismissed. Interesting, right? So the key concept of the Greek justice is that it was, as we call it today, peer-to-peer. The idea of professional judges, lawyers, and stuff actually starts when nation-states start to consolidate in the 17th and 18th century. And the legal systems created at that time worked for a while. Actually, they worked quite well for a number of centuries, like the Industrial Revolution, 19th century. And then the economy started to change because of a number of trends connected to the internet. Rise of the economy, freelancers working from everywhere in the world, right? Of course, capital starting to travel across the borders very fast and without limits. So we have now this very big, interconnected global economy. And let's talk about one case that happens every day. So you have Alice, she's an entrepreneur from France, and she hires Bob, who is a web developer from Guatemala. They make an agreement, so she wants him to do a website for her. He delivers the website, and you know what? She's not happy because she expected something better for her money. So what happens? Well, as you can imagine, dispute, Alice is frustrated, right? Because she's not going to Guatemala to hire a lawyer, right? To sue the guy for like a $500 dispute. So, and this brings us to Kleros. What if she could put the money into a smart contract, right? And this smart contract selects an arbitrator in case something goes wrong in the dispute. And this arbitrator could be Kleros, right? So imagine they do the deal. So Bob creates a website, everything goes right. So the transaction is signed, everybody's happy, money is transferred, and good. But what happens if there is a dispute? So in this case, the money is going to stay locked into the smart contract, and both parties are going to pay an arbitration fee that is going to be used by Kleros, which is an autonomous organization, to select a number of jurors, and these jurors are going to arbitrate the dispute. They're going to vote who is right. So it's crowdsourced jurors, right? And these guys are going to be experts in the type of dispute at hand. And they can come from everywhere in the world. So in this case, imagine that the jurors analyze the evidence, so they analyze the contract that Alice and Bob did. They analyze the product that was delivered, and because of their knowledge on how to build websites, they can know who was right about this, and so they vote, and in this case, Alice wins, and the money from the smart contracts goes to her. Do you understand, like, the basic idea of how it works? Good? Yeah, great. So I'm guessing that you have tons of questions, so I'm going to try to start answering some of them. The first one is, well, who are the jurors and how are you going to select them, right? Hint, you know, Kleros is randomness in Greek. You remember that big stone block called Kleroterion? Kleros, randomness. Terion means kind of altar. So it's like the altar of luck or chance. So we have this woman who lives in Kenya, and she works, she has learned how to develop websites in her spare time, and now she wants to make some extra money, right, on the side. And why not become a juror in disputes about websites? So if she wants to be a juror in Kleros, she needs to have this token that's called Pinakion, of course an ERC20 token, and she's going to put this token into, she's going to deposit it into a subcourt specializing in website disputes. So Kleros looks like a big tree when you have a general court, and from that court you have many different subcourts, and each subcourt is going to be specialized in particular kind of dispute. So this is, I always use the example of the freelancers because it's very easy to understand, but Kleros is a multi-purpose system that can work for all kinds of disputes, right? So in this case, this woman is going to activate the token into the freelancing, let's say, subcourt, and with her, other 3,000 jurors may activate the token, right? So Kleros is going to randomly select a number of jurors to arbitrate it. Imagine that the 7 of them are selected. So why are jurors selected? Because they are incentivized to become jurors, because for each dispute they solve, they are going to collect arbitration fees in it, right? That's the money that was put by the parties as arbitration fee. And how are you going to, how do we make them participate honestly? Because the big risk here, I don't know if I mentioned, but they are anonymous jurors. So there's no identity reputation. So how do we make sure that they don't just press randomly any button like A or B and collect the fee for arbitration, right? Of course, you know, Thomas Schelling, he's the guy on the right, on the day he was receiving his Nobel Prize in 2005 in economics. He's the author of this book, this great book, Strategy of Conflict, where he, well, a game theory book. And in this game theory book, he proposes the concept of focal points. The big, most famous example is you tell two people to meet somewhere in New York tomorrow, but you don't tell them where or when exactly. So any part of New York and any time would be good. But he found that people, in general, they would meet at Grand Central Station in the information booth. It was because of how people coordinate, they they met there. Of course, in Paris, I guess that the normal Schelling Point would be the Eiffel Tower, maybe at noon, or in midnight, like the movie, like midnight in Paris. And on this principle of the Schelling Point, so you can put in economic incentives. So two guys had to pick a square here. So if they pick the same one, they each one make 20 bucks. So who of you would pick like B3? C5? A6? Yeah, okay. So are you sure there was no collusion here between you? No? So that's how it works. Some previous work made on this is in the Truth coin. It's a paper that used a coin that based on sharing principles to incentivize people to answer to questions. And of course, Augur has an oracle that uses the principle of Schelling coin. So in Kleros, jurors are going to vote independently, and they are going to analyze the same kind of evidence, and they are experts in the same kind of field. So according to the Schelling Point principle, they should be assumed to vote for the same result, right? Which is the truth about their dispute. So the incentive works this way. So if you are a juror, like imagine you have 7 jurors, right? You have 6 voting one thing and 1 voting another thing. So we could assume that this guy who voted different, probably he did not take a look at the evidence, or like he was not voting honestly. And this shows like a case where you have how the money is distributed. So remember, Bob lost the dispute against Alice, so he had 1 ETH deposited into the dispute, and he lost the arbitration fee, sorry. And so this arbitration fee from Bob is going to be transferred to all the juries that participated in the decision. So it doesn't matter how they voted, but they are all going to receive the same amount of ETH, right? And then we had 5 that voted the same thing, right? And the 2 that voted differently. So the 2 guys who voted differently from the others are going to lose the token that they deposited for being selected as jurors, and this is going to be transferred to the guys who voted coherently. Good. So basically, the main point of this is if jurors, so you select into the right court depending on your specific skills, and then you behave honestly, then you should make money. If you try to game the system by voting anything, whatever, so you just vote randomly, then you are likely to lose money. So that's how the incentive work based on the Schelling principle. So, all's clear for now? All's good? Yeah? Great. So, we're speaking about how the ecosystem of decentralized companies, decentralized platforms is being built. Ujo music eventually starts to have disputes of like one guy uploads a song and another guy says, hey, this song, like it was my song, you just uploaded again, this belongs to me. So YouTube has content ID, yeah, okay, sorry. YouTube has content ID and a centralized system for solving this. Ujo does not have this. So why wouldn't Ujo just outsource dispute about this to Kleros? Origin has a sharing economy platform, and why couldn't they, instead of having to build an arbitration system themselves, why won't they outsource the disputes to Kleros? And all the other decentralized platforms that are being built at this moment, they could very well start to outsource the disputes to Kleros, including world in VR. So we can all live in this VR world, and all the disputes, the justice system for this VR world could be Kleros. Why? Because of a principle that we know from the time of Adam Smith. We should focus, so we are building this ecosystem together, and we should focus on what we do best, right? So a vision that we have is, so Kleros becoming like an arbitration system that's going to handle the disputes of all the platforms that are starting to grow in whatever, your social media. You can solve that dispute between users, whatever travel disputes, all the disputes you can imagine that are arising in the decentralized economy. We need someone to handle this. What you see now is lots of companies starting to build arbitration systems, which I can tell you, since we are doing this full time, it's a very hard thing to do, right? So it's not something that you can do as a side project while you're trying to build a marketplace. It's something that you should be an expert in. And so what we did is we developed an arbitration standard, because we want to every user in every transaction in this decentralized platform, users should be able to select the arbitrator they prefer. So we're not, Kleros is not trying to be the Google of dispute resolution, right? But one of the options. So if you are running a platform and you want Kleros to arbitrate the dispute, we created a standard that makes all the contracts that you have in your platform arbitrable by Kleros, but also by any other arbitrator that is going to comply with the same standard. So how does it look from the point of view of the user? So you have, this is maybe a platform by this is not Kleros, this is another place, another platform, and they, after the two parties agree on the contract, blah, blah, so they have also to agree on an arbitrator in case a dispute happens. So we can imagine that there is going to be a drop-down menu where parties can agree, okay, I want arbitrator X, Y, Z, Kleros, or whatever. So this is, if we get all the decentralized platforms to agree on this smart contract standard, all the arbitrators are going to be interoperable and plug in and out as you want. So, you want to see the product? Well, we have a proof of concept already built. This is a video, okay. So here is where you create the contract. Of course, this is very early stage, but here you can see how it works. So you create the contract with another party about something. So you enter the description of the agreement. Submit. Okay, it's on the blockchain now. So a dispute starts because Alice was not happy with the website. She wants to start the dispute resolution process. So both has to pay the fee for arbitration because they both have to make this deposit. Then he can add evidence for the jurors to see. And you describe what was wrong with the product. The evidence, and so this is what the part where the jury has to activate tokens to being drawn for the dispute, and then the jury is selected, and now he chooses a dispute. So the juror can have in his dashboard many disputes. So now he has to choose one, and he analyzes the evidence that is sent by the parties, and then he votes for one of the parties, and then so both are aggregated, and all the distribution of money and tokens is done by Kleros. Did you understand more or less how it works? Good. So the product is already working, so we are starting to do some experiments. I see William here is a mathematician, professor of University of Toronto of advanced cryptography, and so his job is try to understand how people vote when you put them into this type of settings, right? And we are starting to do a first experiment of a token curated list, because Kleros can work as dispute solution for a token curated list in the following sense. We did an agreement with Ink Protocol that they have, so these guys were doing Listia before, so it's like an e-commerce marketplace, and they had lots of disputes, and they also had lots of disputes about publications, so people that upload like publications of wrong items to the list, right? If I go to a listing of houses and I upload a car, so that's a problem. So they always had people, like employees, flagging those disputes and bringing them down. And the thing we're trying to test is how Kleros could be used for this purpose. So this is Listia. Imagine now that Alice submits an item to a listing of shoes, and she submits a shoe, right? And she stakes some ETH. The item is accepted, right? And she gets the money back. So what if she submits a flamethrower into the list, right? So she submits the flamethrower, and she stakes the money, and then comes Bob, who challenges the submission, and so now this has to go to dispute resolution. We have to use a jury that analyzes the listing and the rules of the submission and the rules of the listing. Kleros is going to be doing this with the mechanism you saw before, and Kleros, in this case, rejects the listing, so Alice lost, and Bob gets the money. So this is what we are starting to test now. So we have many questions. This is very new, of course, and we have lots of things to research. One of those is, so can Kleros produce faster and cheaper decisions than other arbitration methods? That's one, because it uses a different logic, a logic coming from a world that is not a dispute resolution world. It uses the logic of game theory to solve disputes, and this has not been done before. So that's a very big question that we have to validate through empirical testing. For now, what we think is that Kleros is going to work in disputes where there are two parties and the structure of decision is not too complex, right? And there are no deep values involved about life. So like there was a contract about this commercial dispute. This was the product. This is what was agreed. So if you get some experts voting on this, so it should work. So this is something you have to validate. And also, of course, we are trying to analyze how to prevent jurors who are voting right to being, but eventually came into the wrong place, into the wrong side of the voting, to be unfairly punished. So William has these very interesting challenges ahead. So the Greek had a concept called epikeia that meant that, so sometimes you had an agreement, but the circumstances have changed. And then you need, so the agreement is no longer valid, it's not reasonable to comply with it because of the circumstance change. So they had this moral concept, so it's fine when circumstances change to not comply with what was the strict agreement of the people. But we also like the code is law, right? We also like that what was agreed in the code be enforced. Modern justice system capture the problem of epikeia in what they call force majeure, right? We think that Kleros has the potential of, if every smart contract can have Kleros as arbitrator, it can give an escape hatch when the strict enforcement of a smart contract will become also unreasonable because of a change of circumstances. So this is something we see for a longer time, a longer horizon, but if you want an escape hatch in a smart contract, how do you do it without making a kill switch that introduces a new a new single point of failure in the system. So every society, every community had to solve the problem of social order, and that's why they created legal systems. The Greek had the theory of citizens having the right to judge. In the time of the nation states, so we started to have these trials run by experts called judges and lawyers. And this is a 19th century illustration. The thing is that if you go to the 20th century, so it's not very different. And the thing is that the communities we are starting to see now are starting to be decentralized online communities that have nothing to do with what we had before. So we're building this decentralized justice system that we need for the blockchain age. Thank you very much. Yeah. I see many, many hands. Okay.
Hi, thanks for the talk first. I mean, that's really what I enjoy about all this. I follow you completely until the point where you say how you reward or punish the jurors.
Okay, that's a hard one.
I really think discussion among jurors is an important part of how you reach a decision. Dissenting opinions, having like 4 against 5 is a very different position than having 7 against 1, for example. And the ability to kick out jurors for both parties can be interesting. So why do you try to fix the way it works instead of like letting people choose the way they want to be judged? For example, I could decide, okay, in my arbitration, both of us will be able to kick out 2 of the jurors. And as a party to a jury, I would like to see the history of the juror. For example, you can see that a juror will vote every time against the defendant. Then that's also a problem, right? Because he's biased in a way. You know,
Yeah.
so how do you create that flexibility for competing models to emerge up until the point where you find eventually a model that fits most people?
Those are many questions I'm trying to answer. So why don't have jurors deliberate? Because in some cases there may be no need to deliberate. In easy disputes, remember, at this point we are trying to solve disputes of simple things like I told you, like the case of the website, maybe a small car crash for a minor insurance thing, where one would expect experts to have some like some clarity on who is right in this dispute. So, and we also expect them to be small claims, right? Because yeah, so it's not that this is some. I get always the question. So, are you going to replace lawyers? So, this is going to help more in segments where like lawyers don't go and where arbitrators, traditional arbitration, don't go. Because traditional arbitration is like a mini trial in the end. So, in this like $500 disputes, $1,000 disputes, this method can make a decision that we think can be faster and can be cheaper than any other method. So that's on the one side. So it's about where this works. This is not going to work everywhere. It's going to work, we think, in a number of use cases, as everything always works in a number of use cases. And another thing. So remember the smart contract standard. So Kleros is going to be one method. If there are other methods that are developed by other people, so the users would be able to select, okay, for this type of case, I prefer this other one because it works best for this other use cases. The thing that is important, and this is why we are creating the standard, is that people have the higher amount of choice possible for their disputes. In some cases, Kleros is going to be the best one. In others, what you proposed, the deliberation or whatever other method, will be best. We are at this moment, at this early stage, we are still trying to understand where it works. So, but that's a very valid question.
as a former marketing professional, doing a lot of websites for clients, choose another example, because this one has a very wide array of interpretation about if what was altered was legitimately what happened, etc. But thank you.
This example, so we may do the test, and it may not work here. But you know what's the good thing about this example? That everyone gets it. Everyone gets at once. Thanks.
Another question, or you have mentioned that in the era of illustration, there came the legal systems and the lawyers. So could you imagine that this could evolve into a full-fledged judicial system where you also have judges, jury, lawyers, and not only for resolving disputes on smart contracts, but resolving any kind of dispute? So having a body of law, and then the lawyers would be the oracle that try to insert the information of what the facts that happen in the real world into the system, and have this body of law resolving what's the resolution based on the legislation. And then at the end of the process, you have a jury and a judge that, given the resolution of the dispute by the automated system, they have to cast a final vote on what the human interpretation of what came out of the body of law, and maybe if it doesn't match with what they think it's fair, initiate a process of changing the legislation.
That's a very good question. So that's not what we are working precisely now. We're working on the jury selection and incentivizing system. Smart contracts have the big advantage that they give you enforcement for the ruling, right? That's a big thing. However, we have a partnership. You know Liberland, the country? Yeah, I guess here everyone loves Liberland. So Liberland is starting to build their justice system using Kleros. And they are going to enforce whatever Kleros rules into their territory. So yes, of course, this is not going to happen in like large nation states, at least for like, I don't know how long. But eventually, if there is change in legislation, this could very well start to be used in arbitration, in small claim arbitration in existing governments. Like for a government, from the point of view of a government, I have discussed this with like government officials, and you know, courts are sometimes like they have bottlenecks because they have to handle like small insurance claims, small like this website disputes go to court sometimes, right? And you do have judges and lawyers solving this stuff. So some countries have decided that it's more efficient to before taking something to court, to have some private arbitration or mediation instance. So Kleros at this point is still not accepted by the international conventions on arbitration because of the fact that jurors are chosen, are anonymous, and the legislation on arbitration requires that people know who they are because to avoid potential conflict of interests. So Kleros solves this through crypto economics, but we need to make regulators understand that crypto economics can generate right incentives even when jurors are anonymous. But the short answer is not now, but in the future, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So my question or comment is, I can understand how your resolution protocol would work if there is a clear answer, if there's a clear Schelling point with yes, this contract was fulfilled or not. But if it's not so clear, then as a juror, I have an incentive not to vote on what I think is right, but to vote on what I think the others will think is right, or even more so, I would vote on what I think the others will think, the others will think, the others will think, and get to this sort of, Keynesian beauty competition. So how do we identify? So if we take that as a problem, Kleros right now only works in those kind of disputes where there is a Schelling point. How would we identify those? And as a juror, how can we align the incentives of the jurors to always vote what they think is correct and not start playing these meta games?
That's a very good question, and we still don't have an answer to that one because we're starting to do the tests. We have every reason to think that it will work. The thing is that sometimes we will have the 6-to-1 thing, right? But what we want is to have the least amount of jurors possible in this case, right? The problem is, okay, because there is a cost thing here. If you can solve something with 3 jurors, don't use 11, right? The problem when you have 3 jurors is that you have 2-to-1 result, right? So in that case, one switch from one juror to a different vote would change the result, and that would change how to reward or punish jurors. So as I was telling you, so we are doing research on this. What Kleros has now is an appeal system, right? If some of the parties think that the result was not fair, there is an appeal system, and this escalates to twice as many jurors, and these guys are going to vote again, and if there is another disagreement, so the guy who lost wants to appeal again, he can do it again, he has to pay. It works a bit, I think, like colony system in that sense.
I don't mean that the result is necessarily wrong. Even if we have a 10-to-2 result of jurors, those 2 might have been honestly giving their correct opinion, and I don't want them to be disincentivized. Even if they think, okay, the other 10 are going to vote in favor, and I think it should go against, I want them to be able to say, I vote against, to show that their true opinion without being punished. Now, right now, they have the incentive of then going with what they think the majority will be.
Yeah, no, I totally see, and this is an unsolved problem at the moment. So, in a number of cases, honest jurors are going to be unfairly punished. The thing is that, on average, the honest jurors still make money, and those who want to try to get in the system lose it. But so this is going to happen on average. But we cannot guarantee that in every specific case that is going to happen, because no system of arbitration can, I guess, guarantee something like that. But if we get to build something that is better than what exists now, so we're going to give the world a big improvement. So that is the goal.
Can I, as a juror, simply wait until everyone else has voted and then vote with the majority?
Sorry, again.
As a juror, could I not simply wait until everyone else has voted and then vote with the majority?
I don't understand the question. No, slowly, because I'm not English speaker natively.
If I'm a juror,
yeah, you're a juror.
Could I not wait and see how all the other jurors vote and then vote last to ensure I'm always in the majority?
If you can ask how the other juror voted.
No, I see it on the blockchain.
No, so the vote independently, you can try to look, but so the votes, you can ask how they are going to vote, but they don't have to tell you the truth.
But they must submit their vote to the blockchain at some point. Is it masked? Sorry? Okay. And as a plaintiff, could I write a contract that bribes jurors to vote for me?
So that's the question. You can answer that to William. He's the crypto economic expert. This is something what we are researching, but
okay.
I think we have an answer to that.
And finally, could I not just create a whole lot of fake jurors in the court that I know is going to be affecting me just before I file a complaint?
Like civil attack?
Yes.
The token is intended to solve that. So if there is a civil attack, so the losing party could appeal, and then you have to bribe more jurors, and it can be appealed again and again and again, and it will become increasingly costly for the attacker. And in the end, there is a general court that is going to vote on the dispute, and if so, this is an attack, so the token holders have the incentive not to vote for the attacker, because their value of the token will go down.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. So that was a process that you described, and would I be correct if I say that you assume that all the dispute parties actually know how to describe the dispute? So what the matter is?
The parties, the guys who does the website and the customer, right? So you mean is they don't know how to describe the dispute, and this could affect the outcome of the arbitration?
Yeah, because it's a common problem that parties actually don't know how to describe what the matter is.
Yeah. So we think that eventually there is going to be like templates for that type of dispute, right? If you do a website, so you have the product that was delivered, so and the messages that were sent back and forth by the parties, and the initial agreement, and this is going to be as standardized as possible. But that is not that's not a problem that affects Kleros specifically. That's a problem that affects every dispute resolution system, online dispute resolution system. Like,
I know, but that's why we initially have the lawyers. You go to a lawyer
the
and
lawyers,
he actually
but lawyers
describes
cannot.
you what the matter is.
So lawyers cannot handle all of this dispute because a lawyer is not going to do this for a $500 dispute because it doesn't make any sense financially for him. So this should work in cases where lawyers don't go.
So
Sure.
here again. But then I have a problem because, I mean, as a contractor, then I would do two prices. I would give you a price if you want the arbitration contract built in, and another one, lower one, if you exclude that. Because I
There is one
have
price
a huge
if you-
risk. I have two risks. The one that you're not gonna be happy with the website, which is a very subjective notion.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is that you're in bad faith. I don't know you. You're Alice in France, right? So then I'm gonna have to make you pay a premium.
But this is exactly the problem we are solving. So imagine Kleros, let's assume that it works, right? So this opens a possibility for lots of people in the world to participate in the world economy. Like this guy who is doing websites in India, in Tanzania, in Indonesia. So you don't hire him now because you don't know who he is, and so you're not going to take maybe the risk of losing everything. But if you don't have to pay him directly and you can put the money in a smart contract, which gives you the enforcement, and then you have a dispute resolution system that actually will analyze the evidence at a cost that is going to be efficient, now the guy from Indonesia can work in the world economy, and that is going to drive the supply of website services a lot higher, and this is going to bring the cost a lot lower. So in the end, what this is going to do is bring the cost down of lots of services that today are delivered for freelancers.
But this is already what reputation systems do. Like on eBay, right? The number of stars, the reviews from people. And I know with a fairly good confidence that the guy is going to ship me what he says he would, because he has already done that 100 times.
Sure, there are some that are reputation systems, but they do not solve everything. So Upwork is a platform that is like centralized freelancer platform, and they have the reputation systems, and they do have dispute resolution, which is handled by internal team of dispute resolution, right? So it's still a problem, even if you have a reputation system. And you know what? Lots of disputes actually happen because of the reputation systems. So why? You and I do an agreement, so yeah, I comply, you comply, okay, and then you rate me with a 3-star. Hey, dude, I did everything, why 3 stars? Oh, yeah, you got 3 stars for me. So this is a dispute that was actually created by the reputation system, and this could be also be handled by Kleros.
I was just thinking about the question that was asked before, so in terms of the strategic thinking of jurors who if they know the rule, that the majority is going to win, so they are going to have some meta thinking. Could it be interesting that the rule is not explained beforehand? And so, I mean, another rule could be if there is a kind of a reputation system for jurors. For example, the juror who is drawn, who has the most reputation, would be the one deciding. The other, so since they are anonymous, no one knows, and so on. And so there could be different rules, and the rule which is picked is not public. And this way, the jurors could not think in terms of I need to play by this rule. So yeah, I'm just suggesting like not explaining the rule beforehand. Does it make any sense?
So in Kleros there is no reputation, right? Reputation introduced like a friction for new jurors, right? So I'm not saying that doing a system of arbitration with reputation is a bad idea. I'm just saying that it is a different way of doing it that may work best in some cases and may not work best in some other cases, right? But Kleros has anonymous jurors and can take collude to vote to go for a right result in order to manipulate the distribution of tokens among them. So that's something that William is actually doing research on. The thing is that still there is always the possibility of a party that feels that was unfairly punished to appeal, and this will bring another jury randomly selected, which is going to vote on the same dispute, and this is going to be twice as many jurors, and so on and so on. So that should solve, we think, that problem.
Any other question? I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you, guys.